Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. First weather graphic showing some action up north. Yellow zone here, that's a high surf advisory out until 10 p.m. this evening for those gusty winds and high surf. It could cause minor beach erosion, and then that conditions will improve after 10 p.m. or they'll kick it out longer. And the red zone here, that's for the Northeast Brooks Range, and that's a winter storm warning for 4 to 8 inches of snow expected to fall until 10 a.m. Saturday. And that's above 3,500 feet and really hasn't kicked in yet, but once the front gets farther south, then the colder air will come in, the snowfall level will drop down to 3,500 feet or below tonight, and definitely tonight and into early tomorrow. Moving on to fire danger, the graphic that just keeps hanging on here, barely reaching high fire danger there in the Yukon Flats, where it's about been all summer, and then possibly some areas here back to the west, north of Kivalina there along the coast, maybe there south of Point Lay, or in that general area, but nothing too significant at all. From there, we'll go to satellite imagery showing all the clouds of that storm coming southeastward out of the Arctic there into the Arctic coast and North Slope areas. Quite a bit of wind and some rain with that today, but the winds gusting 60, 65 miles an hour through the some areas of the Brooks Range during the afternoon today, and high as 40 to 45 or 40 to 50 for the North Slope in areas and the Arctic coast. Not bad here through the central interior. Some more clouds. Looks like the Susitna Valley back into the Kuskokwim Valley down to Bristol Bay. This associated with a weather system that's tracking southeastward across the peninsula. Showing up a little better here. The occluded front kind of breaks up as it crosses the Aleutian Range in Kodiak Island with just about no precipitation at all. But it'll redevelop as it moves into the western Gulf tonight. And some sun over the Kenai Peninsula and possibly North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, the Panhandle, seeing a lot of clouds and showers, areas of light rain today, amounts not too heavy, generally under ½ an inch, and the Aleutians, Bering Sea, pretty much under the domination of high pressure out there to the west. Here's the low that's going to be tracking southeastward, and that brought a general area of rain and showers and cloudy skies here, Bristol Bay, up across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Even had showers in the Kuskokwim Delta. Rainfall amounts ranging from really about maybe 1/10 of an inch or so, 0.05 to 1/10 of an inch across the area there. Otherwise, scattered isolated showers here with mostly cloudy skies in across the Alaska Range and scattered around the White Mountains, upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, but nothing very heavy at all. Dry down along the North Gulf Coast. Again, with some sunshine, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula into Prince William Sound, parts of the Copper River Basin areas. But you can see the tighter gradient with that storm up along the Arctic coast there. And again, wind gusts 40 miles an hour at Dead Horse. Prudhoe Bay gusts 51 miles an hour. And Point Barrow 46 miles an hour with winds and rainfall. Again, anywhere from 1/4 of an inch around the Barrow area, or place formerly known as Barrow. Otherwise, in the Panhandle, Klawock picked up about 0.17 of an inch of rain, while Juneau had around 1/4 of an inch. This is all on the decreasing mode, but will linger into tonight, but begin to taper off, become a little more scattered as the night wears on, but kind of lingering until morning. This system redevelops here, especially the occluded front redevelops as the low center tracks into the Gulf of Alaska. Otherwise, isolated showers over southern Alaska in areas mostly over the mountainous terrain. Partly cloudy Cook Inlet, and maybe a shower or two striking Kodiak Island with this trough, otherwise drying out back to the northwest. And this front bringing the colder air in, and again, those snowfall levels dropping. So above 3,500 feet, the winter storm warning for the Northeast Brooks Range, 4 to 8 inches of snow starting tonight, continuing into early tomorrow. And again, the colder temperatures dropping the snowfall level down towards sea level, actually for the eastern Arctic coast. High pressure controls the Bering Sea, but a lot of low clouds, fog, IFR type weather with fog, drizzle, and some isolated showers, but any precipitation will be very light. And then the forecast for Saturday, not much change in this pattern out here in the west. We've got a trough coming over the top, spreading a chance of light rain, fog, drizzle into St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait area, western Seward Peninsula. Front more or less stationary here across the north slope with the main low center tracking eastward. Enough colder air could come down or should come down to produce maybe some areas of light snow on the eastern Arctic coast. And again, the winter storm warning ends at 10 a.m. Saturday with a mixture of precipitation back to the west. Mostly sunny, partly to mostly sunny here, especially on the east side of the Alaska Range. Susitna Valley, Cook Inlet looking really good tomorrow. Mostly sunny skies. Same thing for Kodiak with that northwest breeze. Just a breeze here, not really any strong northwest winds, but enough to make for a dry and partly sunny day, in part anyway, for the Alaska Peninsula, Aleutian Range, and Kodiak. Same thing for Bristol Bay. Isolated showers over the Wrangels. A little more numerous, but still, I'd call it nothing more than scattered for the White Mountains. And as I mentioned, no change in the Bering Sea and Aleutians. System pushes moderate to possibly heavy rain over the central south and southern southeast coast, but rain will extend all the way up to Skagway. Some showers back toward Yakutat. And then on Sunday, that whole system off the chart now, but showers should be by the afternoon ended, even for Stewart and Hyder in those areas, with partly cloudy skies or mostly cloudy, maybe partly sunny here, but dry for the southeast coast with light winds. Mostly sunny south central Alaska and Kodiak Island. Shower chances linger there along and north of the Alaska Range into the 40-mile country. Maybe the mid-Tanana Valley, some of this next system dropping down or coming east-southeastward there, moving along the eastern Russian coast tomorrow night. Definitely will push rain and milder temperatures with the warm front, southwest flow ahead of that thing. So snowfall levels will jump again and back into the 45 to 50 degree range in those temperatures for the afternoon there. So rain, fog, and drizzle, and maybe not quite as windy. And this trough, again, a couple of them coming over the top of the ridge, keeps it unsettled, cloudy with IFR there for the Bering Strait down along the Yukon Delta coast. Otherwise, light winds, massive areas of clouds and maybe low clouds and fog here over the Bering Sea. And for temperatures, lows tonight, mid-30s to mid-40s, Copper River Basin into upper 40s south central Alaska to Kodiak, lower 30s along the eastern Arctic coast, mid-30s there in the Brooks Range, and 40s to near 50 here in the west, and upper 40s for the Aleutians, 45 to 50 for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 55 to 60 southern southeast coast, actually the entire southeast coast in that range, and looking at lower 60s Bristol Bay, near 60 for the Kuskokwim Yukon Delta area, 60, 65 in the Susitna Valley, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, and near 60 back to the north and northwest. Highs near freezing over toward Kaktovik and Barter Island. Lows the following morning, 25 to 30, a little chillier up there with low 30s for the Brooks Range, mid to upper 40s here for the interior, out to the west, and 35 or 32, say, or 30s to near 40, Copper River Basin, a little milder south central Alaska. The highs mid-60s, call it for the Susitna Valley on Sunday, with a little bit warmer in the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First graphic of flying weather tomorrow looks like this. Saturday morning, IFR Brooks Range on out to the North Slope and much of the Arctic coast. Better off to the west there, some marginal VFR, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound. Just about all of the southwest interior to Bristol Bay, part of Kodiak Island, north to the Alaska Range with some IFR to start here, and then looks like across the Tanana Valley to roughly the upper Tanana Valley, over toward from about Delta down toward Northway Toke, VFR, and the Panhandle, IFR over the north, marginal VFR to the south. And for the afternoon Saturday, looking like this, a lot of IFR here across the southeast coast. That storm coming up off the central and south coast mostly, marginal VFR farther to the north. VFR breaking out, Copper River Basin, and Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula. Most of Kodiak Island looking good tomorrow, as well as Madanuska, Susitna Valley. Marginal VFR mostly interior Alaska north and west of the Alaska Range. IFR retreating out toward the coastline in the Arctic, and lots of IFR again over the Bering Sea, right up across St. Lawrence Island to the Bering Strait. And for Sunday morning, massive IFR here from the Central Arctic coast southward into parts of the Koyukuk Valley, westward to the Seward Peninsula, and down across much of the Bering Sea and areas of the Aleutians, although there are some areas of marginal VFR showing up out there. Stays VFR here, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet into the Madanuska Valley, Prince William Sound, and lower conditions now on the southern southeast coast, VFR to the north. And then that continues to improve, although lingering marginal VFR for the southern southeast coastal areas, and up to the north here, marginal VFR with IFR from the Koyukuk Valley out to the Noatak Valley northwest coast, central western Arctic coast. Big chunk of the Bering Sea under the influence of IFR from the Yukon Delta down to Nunivak Island, Pribilofs, but most of the Aleutians now will be on the marginal side. And again, looking really good here, southern Alaska from even the Kuskokwim Valley. So it looks like the marginal VFR hanging up along the Kuskokwim Mountains. And for passes, Anatuvik, IFR becoming marginal tomorrow, and that same trend also for Adigan, improving, starting out low, then becoming marginal into the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR to start, becoming VFR. Pretty good afternoon coming up tomorrow. And for rainy, same trend. Windy, also marginal becoming VFR, and improving conditions for both Isabel and Mentasta. Tanita, VFR. And for Portage, marginal becoming VFR, maybe by noontime. And Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. And for the freezing levels at the surface here, central eastern Arctic coast, very close to the coastline there, with that cold air aloft and that northerly jet, northwest jet coming down from the Arctic there, 2,000 to 4,000 feet, and then 6,000 feet here across the remainder of Alaska, as well as a panhandle, and some warmer air, 8,000 to 10,000 feet over the western Aleutians in the Bering Sea. And for the icing threat, none out here under high pressure, much of the interior as well, but that moisture dropping down. We've got some icing threats slipping on down, just isolated moderate above about 4,000 feet, possibly in toward the White Mountains, possibly getting into the central Tanana Valley, but more extensive back to the north and northwest, especially north of the Brooks Range here with that frontal boundary dropping in, and then some considerable moderate rime icing central southern panhandle with that storm. And then the jet stream here showing that upper level low aloft that associated with that next system. The jet stream cutting in mostly along the Queen Charlottes there, and some good ridging out here over the Bering Sea with 100-knot jet out of the north turning northwest there coming into the central Arctic coast, and then across the northeast interior. And we've got at 3,000 feet some pretty good winds at in that area too, really actually 35 to 45 knots, much of the Arctic coast, North Slope Brooks Range, and then diminishing here down to about the, say, roughly the Tanana Valley, about 15 knots, pretty light over the Copper River Basin, 20 to 25 into the Panhandle, light winds under high pressure out west. Same pattern at 3,000 feet here, light winds, high pressure, 15 knots over the Aleutians. That's about it. Even though we have northwest flow here, it's only 10 to 15 knots, so it won't cause much of a problem. Westerlies 20 to 35 through the central interior, 35 in the eastern Arctic coast, and pretty light the Copper River Basin, but 3,000 feet here, southeasterlies 40 knots coming into the southern southeast coastal areas. And turbulence-wise, with that, occasional moderate chop developing southern panhandle below 5,000 feet and a big area up here over the central and north interior.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms. Why they occurred, the distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region, the rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threats so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. About the same here. Near the coast, a heavier ice near the coast from areas just east of Kaktovik on over, but off the coast here back to the west, mostly, especially when you get to around Point Barrow. And then about the same pattern we've seen, this area, swath of ice persisting, and may move east a little bit over the next 4 or 5 days, but really no big changes expected. Coastal water forecasts, small craft advisories for much of the outer coastline tomorrow, with gusts of 40 knots here on the south coast, and gale force gusts for Clarence Strait out of the southeast, otherwise Stevens Passage, southeast 20, and south 15 for Lynn Canal. Sunday, swing those winds around to the north at 20 knots with 4-foot seas there for Lynn Canal, northeast or northwest 15 for Stevens Passage, southeast 25 for Clarence Strait, and then northwesterlies wrapping back in around that system that's pulling off to the east. 25 knots, 11 to 12-foot seas, falling back to 20 knots on the north coast. And then for Prince William Sound, light west wind, same forecast here for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Westerlies at 10, 5-foot seas, north 15 for the western Gulf Coast, and northwest 20 for the Barren Islands, west 20 for Kamishak Bay, and west at 10 there for southern Cook Inlet. Well, actually all of Cook Inlet, west winds at 10 knots. Pretty good conditions, seas 1 to 2 feet. And the outlook for Sunday, northwest at 10 there for Cook Inlet. So the wind staying light, seas still 1 to 2 feet. Not much change here for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, west 20, 4-foot seas, 15-knot westerlies for the North Gulf Coast, and light northwest winds for Prince William Sound. Shelikof Strait, west 15, northwest 15 here, east side of Kodiak, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, northwest 15, and then for the remainder of the Alaska Peninsula, west winds 10 to 15 knots, 5 to 6-foot seas, northwest 10 for Bristol Bay. Outlook for Sunday, no change there for Bristol Bay, northwest winds 10, and seas down to 2 feet. Light winds here on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, north 15 on the south side, and Castle Cape to Sitkinak, northwest 15, west 15 for all of Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait. Northwest 10 knots, really light winds tomorrow here for the entire Aleutian chain. As you can see, very uniform with high pressure dominating the area there. Seas running 3 to 6 feet, or yeah, 5 to 6 feet, with winds picking up on Sunday, way out there to the west, coming up to 25 knots. So small craft advisories for the areas Kiska on out to Shemya with 7-foot seas. And then easterlies of 15, northeast 10 to 15 for Adak and Atka. And the Fox Islands, northeast winds 15 knots, seas 5 feet. And for the southwest coast, tomorrow, northwest 15, north side of Nunivak Island, south side light northerlies, southeast at 10 for the Pribilof, southwest 20 St. Matthew Island, west winds at 20 for St. Lawrence Island, on in across Norton Sound, seas 4 feet. Outlook for Sunday, still westerly winds there at about 20 knots for the St. Lawrence Island area and Norton Sound, and west-northwest 15 here for the southwest coast. Light northwesterlies for the Pribilofs and west to 20 for St. Matthew Island. Up along the Beaufort Sea coast, winds coming down tomorrow, but about 20 knots out of the northwest, coming down to that in the afternoon there on the far east side, otherwise north at 10. And then about 15 knots out of the northeast here for the west side. Cape Beaufort on down to Wales, looks like 20-knot winds from the west-southwest with 4 to 6 foot seas. And for the next day, same direction, but knock the winds down to 15 knots here for the Chukchi Sea, 3 to 4 foot seas, west 20 on the western Arctic coast, central coast, south 15, light southeast winds at 10 for the east side with seas in the open areas here up to 2 feet. And for tonight, I've got this system dropping down, areas in the Brooks Range above 3,500 feet. In the northeast Brooks Range here, winter storm warning out for 4 to 8 inches of snow, and that winter storm warning extends tonight until 10 a.m. Saturday. Otherwise, look for gradually cooling temperatures and staying pretty windy up there, but winds gradually coming down, especially after 10 p.m. when the high surf advisory ends on the western Arctic coast. Mostly dry over the interior, scattered showers along the Alaska Range here. Otherwise, this system pulling eastward will push rain into the Panhandle. Tomorrow, heaviest central and southern areas, with rain will extend all the way back to Skagway. And then the winter storm warning ends, but it stays wet there for the Arctic coast. Yet another system pushes more rain into that area on Sunday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.